Once again, everyone, welcome to the Zoho Flow for Zoho One series. The idea of this webinar series is to help you build your own custom integrations in your organization so you can automate your workflows and save time and improve productivity. And yeah, as Sharon just introduced me, my name is Arjun and I'm a senior marketer at Zoho. Right now, I take care of content marketing and user education for Zoho Flow. And in this session, we'll focus on building HR and recruitment workflows. We'll cover popular HR and recruitment applications like Zoho People, Zoho Recruit, and other applications like Sheet, Zoho Sign, and so on. All right, so here's what we will cover. First, we'll run through a very basic introduction of what a workflow is and what workflow automation is. Those who have attended the previous sessions, you would have listened to this earlier. But just so that everyone is on the same page, I'll go through the basics and then we'll see why Zoho Flow is the perfect integration and workflow automation partner for your organization, especially when you're using Zoho One. We'll then have a quick demo of building a workflow from scratch in Zoho Flow, so you'll get to know how to build a workflow and how to automate them. Then we'll move to the interesting part where I'll talk about very easy to implement use cases in the space of HR and recruitment using the most popular apps in Zoho One. So we'll quickly go to the basics. What is a workflow? So to understand this, just imagine your own organization and you will see that there are a lot of departments there, right? Different verticals and different departments. And under each vertical, you'll have numerous teams that work on very specific activities. So when you look at HR as a vertical, you will have a team dedicated for sourcing candidates, one for employee experience, and one for interviews and so on. Now, each of these teams that you have in your organization will use a particular set of apps, right? And if you look at how you do work on an everyday basis, you will see that all the steps that you perform on these apps repeat every single day. I'll take an example here. If you just look at employee experience, or maybe just take a new employee onboarding process. In that, once a new employee is added to Zoho People, you would want to send them a list of documents to be read and signed. You'd probably use a Zoho Sign or Writer and so on. You would then want that employee to be added to your organizational email account. And following that, you may want to introduce them into different team communication channels. For example, Zoho Cliq. So this process or these steps of different actions that you take remain the same every time a new employee is added, which makes it a workflow. Now, the data that goes through these workflows changes every single time, but the steps remain the same. Now, when you have repeatable steps or repeatable workflows, they become automatable. It becomes very easy for you to connect these apps and then automate your workflows. So you get more time to do work that actually matters and less time moving data between them. Now we'll just look at the different components that make up a workflow before we move forward. So take any workflow and you can see that there is always an event. In our example, it was the new employee being added to the organization, which kickstarted that particular workflow. So that employee getting added is the trigger for the workflow. And the steps that we mentioned, like getting a document signed, getting introduced to the Cliq channel, a new email account being created, are the actions that follow. Now, in some cases, you might want to add a logic element like a condition to check if an employee is a manager or not. So depending on whether an employee is a manager, you might want to take a different step. For example, managers may need to go through a different training or have to sign a different set of documents and so on. In that case, you might need a condition. And if it's satisfied, you take one branch or if it's not, take another branch. So these are the kind of logic elements that we are talking about here. So these three components make up a workflow in most cases. Now, this is important for you to build a workflow in Zoho Flow. All right, so now the next question is, why use Zoho Flow, right? So you being a Zoho One user, the most obvious fact is that Zoho Flow comes as part of the package, so you don't have to pay more to integrate your apps and automate workflows. And the second reason is that most organization, I can also see from the polls that you all use a variety of methods to integrate your apps. Some of you, not some of you, I think most of you use native integrations and plugins to integrate your apps. Some of you use custom code, and some of you use Zoho Flow already, yes. And there are also other platforms like Zapier, Make, and all that. Now, why is it important to use a single comprehensive platform? So, as I already told you, there are different departments using different solutions for integrations, right? When you have different solutions in an organization, what happens is that as the teams and the departments grow, it will become practically impossible to track who built what and how is data moving between different apps. It becomes very difficult for you to troubleshoot an integration if something goes wrong. And in case you want to change or modify an integration and make it better, or to add a new app, you will then every single time have to go to that particular person who built that integration. And this becomes a challenge as your organization grows. So the best thing that you can do is to make that switch as early as you can. Even if it's a small team or a department, make that switch to a platform capable of both integrating simple integrations as well as complex workflows. So what you will get is a centralized visibility of everything, all integrations in your organization. You can arrange them by folders and put different integrations from each department in separate folders, so you don't have to mix them in any manner. Now, the second reason is that you can build your workflows exactly like you draw a workflow diagram. You don't have to follow a linear methodology here. You can just build, drag and drop, and build workflows exactly how you draw them on paper. Now, final thing is that I'm going to discuss is how comprehensive our app support is. Zoho Flow currently supports 1,000+ applications, which includes all popular Zoho One applications, your popular and favorite WordPress integrations, Google apps, Microsoft apps, and so on. And aside from all that, Zoho Flow also supports on-prem integrations. So if your organization has apps on your private network, that also can be integrated. All right, so now we have covered the basics and the concept part. Now let's go to the platform, see how we can build a workflow from scratch in Zoho Flow. And to do this, I'm going to take this particular use case. So it's a very common use case in the HR and recruitment space. So imagine that you are using Zoho Recruit to add all the candidates for a particular role, and you would want to save this information in a spreadsheet, right? You would want to back it up. You will also need to notify the respective hiring managers when that candidate is added. And lastly, for each candidate, you would want a folder in your team work drive where they can upload their resume, their portfolio, or their task submissions, and so on. Now, in order for you to do it all manually, I think you would take at least around 10 minutes to complete this workflow for one candidate, right? Now, we'll see how we can bring it down to under a second using Zoho Flow. So here I have Zoho Recruit open. Here you can see there are different modules, like candidates is there, interviews, referrals, and there I have open candidates. And I already have a few candidates listed here. Now, this is the spreadsheet that where I want the information of all these candidates to go. I'll also show you the Cliq channel. I've created a test channel to show you how it's done. So in this channel, I want the candidate ID to be shown whenever someone new is added. And for work drive, under the team folder, under general, I've created a folder called hiring, where I want Zoho Flow to create a folder for each candidate. Now let's build the flow. So when you open Zoho Flow for the first time, you won't see any of it. This account I've been using for a very long time. So you have a lot of flows and folders here. So I'll just go to our folder here and I'll create that flow here. So in order to create a new flow, just go to the top right. You can see a create flow button. Just click on that and give your flow a name. And click create. If you remember the core concept that I shared about a workflow, the first component is the trigger. In this case, we are using Zoho Recruit. So since that's an app, I'm going to click on configure here and look for Recruit. There it is. I'll click next. Now I want this flow to be triggered when a new candidate is created. So I'll just click on record created and click next. So this is where you need to add a connection to Zoho Recruit. So connection is very important in Zoho Flow to create a new workflow or an integration. So what it does is you're authorizing Zoho Flow to access your Zoho Recruit account. So I already have a connection, but I'll just show you how you can create a new one. Just need to click on the new button, give it a name, and click authorize. And the Zoho Recruit account linked to this Zoho Flow account will be automatically populated here. And these are the permissions that you will be giving Zoho Flow. So since I already have a connection, I'm just going to close this window, or else your connection would be created at that point. I'll just use the connection I have here. And I need to now select the module. Now, these are the modules that are automatically fetched from the Zoho Recruit account that I have. As you can see here, these are the different modules. So we need to select candidates from that. So I'll just go over here and select candidates and click done. And now the trigger is set. We'll just look at what the next step is. The next step is to send the data that comes from the trigger to our spreadsheet in Zoho Sheet. Let's see how to do that. To add a new action to this trigger, all you need to do is go to the left side and you can see there's a tab called Apps. Under that, you can search for Sheet. And under Zoho Sheet, these are all the actions that are available. So what we need to do is to create a new row with these the data. So I'm just going to drag and drop this action right under the trigger, and we'll now configure this action. So as I said again, we have to configure the Zoho Sheet connection here. So you have to create and use specific separate connections for each app that you want to integrate. But once you create a connection, you can reuse that connection in any number of flows that you use. So in this case, the spreadsheet name that we need to get here is candidates. So I'm just going to go under spreadsheets and select the spreadsheet where I want to input this data. Now, all the columns that I've configured in that spreadsheet will automatically appear here. Now, all we need to do here is to take in data from the trigger and send it over to each of these fields. Now, how do we do that? In order to take data from a previous step into an action, on the right side, you can see there is a section called Insert Variable. Under Insert Variables, you can see that the trigger we have added is available. So all data that's coming from the trigger will be listed here in the form of variables. So these are all the different variables, and the data type of all those variables will be listed alongside. So what I want to map here is the candidate ID, and it's already here. So what I'll do is I'll click on the field here and I'll click on candidate ID. So now we can see the dollar symbol and the brackets, right? What it means is that this is now mapped to candidate ID from record created. Similarly, we can map the first name that's coming from the trigger. I'll just click on the field here. I can either go to the first name variable, or I can just go to the search bar, look for first name, and there it is. I'll also do the same thing for last name, and the same thing for email. Yeah. So I've mapped all the variables to each of these fields. Now I'll click done. And the next action we need to add to this trigger is notifying the hiring manager. Let's see how we can do that. And just how we added the create row action, we look for Zoho Cliq. And under that, I'm looking for a message in channel action. And here it is. I'll drag and drop that action. Again, we have a Zoho Cliq connection already there. Now it's time to select the channel where I want to post this message. So I'm looking for new candidates. Now let's configure the message that I want to send in this channel. I'll type in new candidate, added, and I'll just add the candidate name, candidate ID here. And that's it. Our last action for this workflow is to create a new folder in our work drive. So I'm just going to look for work drive. The action I'm looking for is create folder. So I'm dragging and dropping it here. I have the work drive connection. So how do I want to name this folder? So the way I want it is the candidate ID should appear first, followed by a hyphen, and then the last name. So just how we map data to other fields, you can do it here. I'm going to the trigger section. Then I'll click on candidate ID, hit space, a hyphen, another space, and the last name. And where do I want this folder to be created? Under my team folder, general, and under general, I have a folder named hiring. And that's it. Now, when you create a workflow in Zoho Flow, make sure that you test and debug that workflow using this test and debug button on the top right. It will let you diagnose any issues if there are something. And always make sure that you finish testing and make sure that it's running using a sample test data before you actually switch on your flow. But right now, I'm just going to switch on your flow to show you the demo. So you just switch on the flow here, and we will now enter a new candidate into Recruit. So I'm in Recruit now, and I'm clicking on the plus button, candidate. I'll just enter some test data here. I'll just enter the first name as Bruce, last name as Test. I'll use the same phone number here. And I'll just enter some dummy details here, maybe experience 5 years of experience. And I think that should be it. Yeah, maybe this one as well. Now I will save this candidate. Let's see if the flow has worked. We'll first go to the sheet. We will quickly refresh the sheet to see if it has entered the data. Yes, as you can see here, Bruce, the candidate, has been added to the spreadsheet. Now we'll go see if the message has been delivered in Zoho Cliq. There you can see it's available now. And finally, in Work Drive, under General Hiring, the folder is available for the documents to be uploaded. I'll just go back to Flow and I'll just show you a quick thing. Here in the History tab, you can see the execution details. So you can see how much time the workflow has taken to be completed. And if you click on that, you can see all the input and output data that has gone through this flow. So in some cases, if your flow fails, you can then diagnose using the History tab here. All right. So now you just got a glimpse into how you build workflows in Zoho Flow and how quickly these workflows are performed and automated using Zoho Flow. So now we have to compare how much time you would take if you were to do this manually. I think we guessed it to be around 10 minutes and compare that to the 1 second that Zoho Flow took. See the kind of improvement in productivity and efficiency that this can bring into your organization if you automate like 10, 15 workflows in your each department, right? Okay, now we'll go to the most exciting part where I'll share plenty of use cases that you can actually use in your teams. So I'll just give you 3, 4 examples, and then I'll also show how it's built in Zoho Flow. We will not build them from scratch. I also already have them prepared in that folder. And then we'll also go to some examples alone. All right, so the first one I'm going to share with you is this one. So this use case is pretty much similar to, or it comes before the previous example. It's a stage before that one, where candidates are sourced. So you have your web form or a website where you have a form where candidates can apply for a particular role. Now, let's say that is Zoho Forms. Then you would want the information that comes from Zoho Forms. Whenever they submit something, you want it to be added in Zoho Recruit. But here's the catch. You only want it to be added if they are new to Zoho Recruit. That means if their entry is already there, you don't want it to be added again because it would be a duplicate. And finally, you also need to send an email to the candidate informing them that they have been added, their submission has been received, and that we'll contact them in case we are interested. Now let's see how this is built in Zoho Flow. Yeah, it's this one. So the first step is like Zoho Forms, a new entry submitted. And then here is where the checking for duplicate happens. So these 3 steps together make up that duplicate checking. I'll show you how. First, the action is fetch record. What this does is using a unique value like an email address or a phone number, we can check if a record already exists that is associated with that email. So here the search value, I have mapped the email that came from the trigger. So this action will check for any entries that are associated with this particular email. And then I've added a decision. So remember earlier I talked about logic elements, right? This is one such logic element. To use a logic element on the left side, you can see there's a logic tab. You can see plenty of logic elements here. Under that, you can see there is a block called decision. What it does is I can create conditions here. So here the condition that I've added is candidate ID is null. Now, what does that mean? If after searching for that record using that email address, if it hasn't returned a candidate ID, then only then create a new record. Otherwise, just stop the flow there. Now, after you create a new record, you also want to send the candidate a confirmation email, right, of receiving the application. So let's see how we have configured that. I have configured the from address, the reply to, the to address, and all that. And here's the subject and also the body. And that's how easy this workflow can be built. We'll now go to the next example. Here, we are looking at making it easy for you to onboard new employees. So whenever a new employee detail is added to Zoho People, you would want to send them a welcome email. If there is an onboarding team in your department, you would want to send them or create a new task list for them. Similarly, you would then want to add the details of that onboarding into their team calendar so that everyone knows when to be ready with that. We'll see how this is done. So the trigger is record created using Zoho People, and there's a send email. So what this email is, it's a welcome email to the employee. And see how I have customized that email using details from the trigger. So I have mapped the first name in the body of the email. I have mapped the designation of that candidate and the department, which all came from here. So you can see here it's a variable. All right. And I have provided information like the start time, the point of contact, the manager information, all that in this email. And finally, I've also created an event in the team calendar using the date of joining, the email address, and so on. So that's another workflow that's automated. Now we'll go to the next example. In this one, we'll look at how right after a candidate is confirmed or selected, if you will be able to send them an offer letter, which they can sign using Zoho Sign. And also, once they have signed or once the document is sent for signing, you can notify the employee or the hiring manager. So let's see how this is built. So I've built a one-step workflow here where I've used the change in record updated trigger for Zoho Recruit, and I've used the Zoho sign action to send a particular document. So I should have the offer letter template ready in Zoho sign to be able to do this. I can configure all these different values that I have, which are modifiable. You can add more actions to this workflow to customize it for the way it works in your organization and the way you want it to be automated. Sometimes you might have some activities that you would want to do manually and to automate the rest of it. So you can choose how you do that here. All right, one more example. Yeah, this is interesting. So most employees join the company with a probation period, right? In most cases, it's going to be 90 days or something. So when an employee is added in Zoho People, immediately you will know when that probation period will end and when the review has to take place. So once the employee is added, you would want to add the date of review in the manager's calendar, then wait for 90 days before sending a review reminder. We'll see how this is done. Again, the trigger is record created in Zoho People, and we have created an event here, and see how we have added another logic element called delay here. So from where do we get logic elements like this? Just have to go to the logic tab. You can see there is a block called delay, and we'll see how it's configured. So you have two options in delay. One is you can delay for a particular duration, or you can delay until a certain date. You'll have a calendar here, and you can set a date here. So I've used a delay for option here so that it delays the next action for 90 days. So this action messaging in the user and the manager will happen only after 90 days of creating the event here. And that's how this flow is built. Now I have a couple of examples more, but I'll just give you the conceptual idea of those workflows instead of showing you them in Zoho Flow. It's a very simple use case where leave requests and approvals are managed. So once an employee submits a leave request in Zoho People, you would want to send a notification to everyone in the project channel. So this is especially the case if you have teams working on a specific project and they have very tight deadlines. So in those cases, you would want everyone in the team to be notified of a particular employee's absence. And you would also want the info to be added in the calendar for everyone to see it later on. Now, the actions that we use here would be send message in channel, and this would be create event. All right. So we'll go to the last example here. So this will be very useful if you have like employees traveling on different meetings, and if you have a travel desk for that to book tickets and to arrange accommodation and so on. So you would have noticed that whenever you book a flight or a hotel, you would get an email which looks templatized. As in, the body of the email will be very formatted, and only the data in those formats will change, right? So with Zoho Flow's email, what you can do is you can set up this email trigger to receive emails from a particular address or from a mailbox, and Zoho Flow will automatically parse information from the body of the email. Now, once you have that information, you can use those information as variables for the rest of the actions. So if you have the travel date, the destination, the amount, and so on, you can straight away store those details in Zoho Sheet. You can also send the details to the employee, that you can send a confirmation message of the booking being completed. And you can also add the travel dates to the team calendar. So by now you would have got a very good idea of how you can very easily bring your actual workflows in your teams as automated workflows in Zoho Flow, right? Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And this is just a few examples in HR and recruitment alone. Now think of how much you can integrate using Zoho Flow. So what I would suggest is that all of you just try to draw your own workflow diagrams on a piece of paper, see how data is moving and which all apps you're touching on the way to completing a workflow, and then bring all of that into Zoho Flow. So wherever you have automatable, repeatable steps or actions, bring it to Zoho Flow. Wherever it needs your creativity, your effort, do that manually. And with that, I'm going to end this session.